Okay, so we should be recording. We should be ready to go. Um, so I'm going to just jump in with a demo of how to install Drupal via this web form that I provided. This is this is a system called Agir. It's like a system administration front end utility for managing a lot of Drupal sites. It works. It works fairly well for this kind of setting where we're going to have like dozens of websites that ultimately I have to manage. Like from the backend sysadmin perspective, I'm managing all these, and it just makes it simpler if I can have some top-level control over all of them. In your typical library setting, unless you have like a ton of microsites or something, in a typical library setting, you're not necessarily going to be using a tool like this. So I'm also going to demonstrate, during this session today, how to install Drupal in a more traditional way. But honestly, I think the installation process is fairly trivial in most cases because if you have an IT guy, your IT guy will install Drupal for you, and if you don't have an IT guy, then you'll very likely be going to a third-party hosting provider who can most likely install Drupal for you or give you a one-click installation process, kind of like what we've done here. Nonetheless, it's an important first step before you can get into your sandbox sites. So let's demonstrate this process, and let's hope it works too. So I'm going to provide my domain name, S Fitzpatrick. Because we have dozens of these sites, every site needs to have a unique domain, but they need to share these common portions for like DNS reasons, basically. So I'm going to choose the standard install profile. Drupal 7.15 is the platform. So Drupal 7.15 is the current release of Drupal 7. A new release of core comes out periodically, like maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know that it's on a schedule per se, but every now and then a new one comes out. So the next one will probably be 7.16 unless it's not. They might skip a release to the public and go straight to 7.17, whatever. But the numbers grow incrementally, and part of managing a Drupal site is keeping up with the new releases and being able to install the new releases when they come out. And I'll be able to demo that in later sessions. I'm just mentioning it right now. Domain alias, we can skip over this. And then I need to provide an email address. I'm going to use sean@listhost.org. Confirm. The client name, I told you to, this could be anything. I'm just telling you to use something that I can, something that's useful for me for finding you later. So this is good. And then I click sign up. Oh, okay. So I already have this email address in the system because I've been using this already, so I'm going to try a different email address. This one already exists too. Okay. Do I have another one I can use real quick? No. Let me... Oh, yeah. Okay, Bill just chimed in with a chat message to say he signed up about a half hour ago. No confirmation yet. Yeah, Bill, if you don't get your confirmation soon, I'll just send it to you manually. So excuse me while I log into the back end here and yeah, sorry the audio is choppy, guys. You know, I'm sure it's a bandwidth issue, and I may not be able to do anything about it. I'll talk slower though to make up for the choppiness. I have to delete my my username from the system so that I can do this demo today. Sorry about this. Bill asks whether the site will persist a while after the course ends. Yes, we will keep the site around for about 6 weeks, and then you'll have to take your business elsewhere. Or you can pay for hosting with us. We welcome that. We work with a lot of libraries for hosting, and it's very cheap. But this platform that you're on now we'll need to clean it up after about 6 weeks after the course ends. Okay, let me try again with this form. Oh, using this email. It's churning slower, so I think that means it's working. Okay, so now I get this confirmation message saying that I'll receive an email, and I trust that it'll come. And so now what's going on in the background is there's a bunch of scripts running on the server that's taking the information I just provided and installing Drupal. So all this stuff is happening automatically. So let's wait for that email. And now is also a good time to mention that things like choppy audio and my little fumbles during these demos are all things that I'll just apologize for in advance once and just say, sort of reiterate that I feel that these sessions are a really valuable way for me to demo the course material in a live setting. It's totally like bonus material, and it's self-funded and self-supported. I don't have like a support team over here who can like help me. I think the connection went down, but it should be back now. Can somebody confirm that you can still see me and hear me? It's good timing because we were just talking about I'll wait a sec for someone to confirm via chat that you can still hear me and see me.
The conference is in presentation mode. There are 6 parties in the conference. You will now be placed into the conference.
Hi all, I should be back via audio now. Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me? Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So, well, it was interesting timing because I was just talking about how these sessions are completely like self-supported, and they're not very professional, and you know, I'm like the only one in the ALAE course instructors who really does this kind of thing, and I think it's a valuable addition to the normal course materials, but I apologize in advance for occasional audio issues. And on the upside, you'll have an opportunity to nail me for this kind of thing when you do your course evals at the end. So hold your feedback till the end. But you know, but I do apologize. Okay, so let's see if that email came. Yeah, I got an email saying my new site has been created, so I'm going to go to this one-time login link and log in. So here's where I need to make note of my username. It's admin, and I need to. Now is a good time to set a password for the next time I want to get into the site. And Drupal has this nice widget thing here for telling me the strength of my password and whether the data of the two fields matches. And I can now click Save. So I'm into my site. You know, I mentioned usually like one of the first things I do when I install a new Drupal site is to just go into the site information and give my new site a name. And I can give it a slogan too. I've never really worked on a site for a client where we've had a slogan. I don't know if that necessarily applies to most of like a library type organization, because if you have a slogan, it's probably part of your logo image, and it doesn't need to be like a text field. But anyway, the options there. Hit save. Now I can go to my home page and see that my site name and my slogan are there, and now my site starts to have its own unique identity. Okay, so Christine asked, I changed my username from admin to something else. Is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. So here's what's going on with that. The first user, the admin user, I just noticed I misspelled site. The admin user in Drupal is a special user. It's the first user account, and it's the only account that automatically has access to do everything on the site. So it's the super user. So I usually say that in an institutional setting, like let's pretend this is your library's website, Christine, not your personal sandbox site. If this were your real production site, I would say don't make the admin account something personal, because it should be something that can belong to the institution. It shouldn't be a personal. You shouldn't consider it a personal login. Okay, so I've created my site with its own very basic, unique identity. The next thing that I told you guys to do is go into the modules and start enabling some modules. So, just a word on this. I have already installed a bunch of modules that you're going to need throughout the course. In a normal setting, it would be up to you to determine what modules you need and you know, it would be up to you to install them. But since like we have some control here over what you're going to be building throughout the course, I just installed all the modules on your behalf because it just saves a lot of time. So the modules are installed. I'm going to need to enable some. Like I need chaos tools, calendar, date, date API, date all day is a good one. Date pop-up. I don't usually use date repeat API. I don't remember if I told you guys to enable it. If I did, that's great, but I usually don't use it. This is just the list of the ones I told you to install, but I'm going off of memory. Okay, then I save my configuration, and now that the modules are enabled, their functionality will be available to me. What does all this mean? The modules extend the functionality of Drupal. So Drupal core is enough to get you started with like a basic website. And Drupal core is kind of like if you think about it on the back end, it's kind of like it's an API that other developers can extend and do their own thing with. And so the extended functionality of Drupal is wrapped up in these modules. So every module adds some functionality to your website. I'll pause to answer Kevin's question, which is a really good question. He asks, are there any security worries about modules? Yeah, there are. It's up to the module developers and the Drupal community to keep these modules secure. So if a security risk is revealed, you know, the community is compelled to react to the risk and patch the module and roll out a new version of the module. And then it's up to you as the site maintainer to update your modules. There's a listserv. I manage a ton of Drupal sites for clients, and so I try to keep track of this stuff probably more than any individual would. Any individual site maintainer would, but there's a listserv for module security issues, and once the issues are resolved, the developers will publicize the issue, and it's something that we just watch very closely. And I've observed that most of the security risks are most of the security risks involve cross-site scripting. So a hacker will discover a way to insert some scripting into your website from a remote source that will execute some process on your website and your server that'll mess things up. So, it's important, I think, to just be aware of where those cross-site scripting risks can come from, but it's mostly things like any forms that are out there on your site, like a comment form or a web form or whatever, just need to be secure. And we'll talk more about this as we go along. The most important thing, though, is just to keep your modules up to date. Okay, so I've enabled a bunch of modules. Now it's time to start configuring some stuff. You guys have already, most of you, I think, have already done this, so I'm just going to blow through it quickly. The backup and migrate one is I think this is a good thing to do right off the bat because you want, I don't know if you guys can see my little join me admin thingy, but sometimes it gets in the way of the screen demo. Okay, so I'm going to now create a backup schedule. And this will back up my database, so if something happens, I can just roll back to a previous version. So I give my schedule a name. I want to back up every hour. And let's say I want to keep 12 files. This will keep 12 hours worth of backups. And I want to dump these into the scheduled backups directory. And the schedule is saved. So it's simple. It's just a good thing to do right off the bat. And you'll get an idea, like as you play around with more and more of these modules, like they each have their own configuration page. And so the workflow is like you enable the module and then you go and configure the stuff. So these patterns that we're kind of going through early on will repeat throughout the course a little bit. Oh, the next thing I had you guys do is enable some WYSIWYG profiles. This gives you some visual buttons to use while you're manipulating the text in your site. And you have, the cool thing about Drupal is like, the Drupal core is very basic, very bare bones. As a result of that, every add-on can be very highly configurable in a way that most out-of-the-box kind of packages are not. So for other types of environments, you wouldn't expect to have this much control over your WYSIWYG, but it's nice that Drupal exposes a lot of this stuff to you. So I'm going to enable some buttons on my WYSIWYG. I like to just enable the ones that are going to produce kosher HTML. And then sometimes clients want me to enable a bunch of other buttons too. But I like to just enable the buttons in a limited way that will give limited enough options to the end users that we can maintain an overall sense of stylistic consistency throughout the site. Yeah, I'm not trying to be an asshole about it. I just don't like to enable a lot of buttons. Hang on, I'm going to type some messages to the few people who have just joined, because they may not know that they need to join up to the audio session. Okay, so I've enabled the backup and migrate stuff, and I've configured the WYSIWYG stuff. Any questions or anything right now? Oh, okay. Christine asks about the text formats, the input formats. This is a really good question. So this kind of goes back to this that security issue, the cross-site scripting issue that I mentioned. So Drupal will take all of the input and run it through all of the input from these text forms, like comment forms, node forms, etc., like a contact us form, whatever it is. Drupal will take the text that the user types in and run it through some filters to sanitize the content. So full HTML will allow like the full range of HTML tags, like image tags, you know, links and lists and numbered lists and tables and so forth. Filtered HTML will allow a few tags like bold and italic and maybe images. I don't even remember. I don't even think images are allowed. Anyway, filtered HTML will allow a few limited tags, but not the full range of tags. So when you're thinking about which format to use for what for which areas of your site, like all the content that goes into your site that your content managers will have will have access to will probably be full HTML, and then stuff that the end users have access to, like comment forms that where like your patrons or your end users are going to be adding comments. Those fields, you probably don't want to enable full HTML for those. You'll enable filtered HTML so that if the end user tries to insert like tables and stuff, that stuff will just get stripped out. Tables are not a security risk, but like images could be a security risk, because if the image URL is not actually an image but a link to a script, and the site executes that script in the image tag, then things could potentially get real bad. So there's some minor security risks with the full HTML format, fewer or no security risks with the filtered HTML format, and then you can also create some formats that will be a lot looser for like things like JavaScript or even like PHP. That's just a little more advanced, but that's text formats in a nutshell. There's also like some stylistic considerations when you're deciding what input formats to use. Like maybe you want some users to have very limited access to styles, and you don't want them like embedding images or whatever. So you just don't give them access to that. Okay, that's a really good question. I actually I don't remember if we went over that in the course materials, but I'll try to send some additional links where you can read more about that. It's a pretty good topic to understand. Any other questions? I'll just wait a sec because people might be typing right now. Okay, so no other questions so far. I wanted to demonstrate the manual process of installing Drupal, which you won't be doing for this course unless you asked me specifically for some access to do that. Like I said, I think this whole process of installing Drupal for most of you is fairly trivial, but nonetheless, you know what? I'm getting distracted. I had Photo Booth open and I realized my camera's running. I think my computer is kind of maxing out on CPU right now. There's a lot going on. Anyway, okay, so for most of you, the process of installing Drupal will be fairly, well, it's something you might have to do once and then you'll never do again. Or it's something that maybe your IT guy was going to do. Anyway, I still think it's useful to do this demo. So, how many of you have a familiarity with like command line Linux stuff? Not too much. Kevin has not too much. Oh, I'm sorry if the audio is choppy. I asked how many have experience with command line Linux stuff. How many of you look at this thing that's on my screen right now and it doesn't scare you? Okay, so if you anyway, I will show you really briefly how to download Drupal via the command line. Yeah, Kevin, this is a terminal on my a terminal on my local machine that gives me access to the remote server. So I'm logging into the server. It doesn't matter if you have no experience, that's fine. You can just go get a snack while I do this and come back in a minute. This is not something you really need to know, but it's a really fast and efficient way of doing stuff on servers. So now I'm logged into the server, and I need to download Drupal onto this server. So there's a couple ways I can do that. I go to the Drupal.org website, and here, let's go to the Drupal homepage. This is my dashboard because I'm logged in. So let's say I'm going to the Drupal.org website for the first time, and I'm trying to figure out how to install Drupal. I'll go to this Get Started with Drupal button, and I'll find the Drupal 7.15, well, the Drupal project page, and I'll notice that 7.15 is the most recent version. So I need to download this. I can download it to my local machine, and that's great. But I also want to download it to the server, because ultimately this site is going to be on the server. So to download it to the server, I can do something like this, and it goes to the server automatically. I can also use a more advanced but even more efficient way to download Drupal. It's through a command line utility called drush. So I can just use this command drush dl. Oh. Well, never mind. Let's not use drush. I'll send you some more information on drush because it's awesome. The way I have it installed on this server isn't going to let me do what I want to do. But anyway, I use that command wget and then the URL to grab the file off of the Drupal server and put it directly on mine. So it's similar to downloading it onto your desktop. It's just a way to do that via the command line. Okay, so now that Drupal is downloaded, I need to unpack it, unzip it. And now I can delete the zip file. It's actually called a tar file. It's a different way of compressing the file, but it's like a zip file on Windows. And now I have a directory on my server called Drupal 7.15. I'm going to move this to just something simpler called Drupal. Okay, so now the Drupal code base is sitting out there on my server. I need to now give Apache, the web server Apache needs to have access to this directory in order to put the code that's on this directory onto the web. I usually just copy one configuration file into another one. And just edit it as I need to. This is stuff that your IT guy or your web host will do for you. I still think it's useful to demonstrate. Nano is like Vim, yeah. Nano is a lot simpler. I just prefer it because it's simple. So it's really Nano. What I'm doing right now is I've opened up a text editor in my shell, and the text editor is called Nano. It's very small, so that's why it's called Nano. So I edited a few things in the Apache configuration, and now I need to tell Apache to enable the site, and now I need to restart Apache. And now if I go to my browser, that URL that I just set up, which is sfitzpatrick2.ecourse.listhost.org, should go to the installation page. So that stuff that I just downloaded onto my server is now live on the internet. And here is the page where I'm supposed to select my installation profile. If you're afraid of the command line, it's a little scary, I guess, at first. I know I was afraid of it at first. You can also do what I just did. You can do basically the same thing via FTP. So I can connect to the server with my FTP client. FTP is a protocol for transferring files from one place to another. So I'm in my FTP client, and you can see that Drupal directory that I just created. So this is just a visual way of seeing what's on the server. So I can create a new directory called Drupal2. And then I downloaded Drupal to my local computer. And if I was using FTP rather than SSH to copy files to the server, I can just drag and drop what's on the local computer into the server via this FTP client. And this will take probably about a half hour to do, so we're not going to wait for the whole thing to get copied over. In fact, I'm just going to stop this process. So here's where you would just go and you would just start this process and then go and get coffee or something. But doing it via the command line is way cheaper. So if you're paying me by the hour to do work for you, you don't want me to use FTP because it just takes forever. But if you can just go and have lunch while this stuff is going on, then it's no big deal. Okay, so now that we have Drupal, the code installed on the server, and I'm here at this installation screen. The next thing I need, in addition to the Drupal code base, which I downloaded and installed here, is I need to have a database for all the content and configuration to get stored in. So it's really simple to do this in a visual interface rather than on the command line. So there's a couple of tools that give you access to managing MySQL databases. The most popular one is called phpMyAdmin. So that's where I am now. And I'm going to log in to phpMyAdmin with the MySQL root user. And this just gives me a visual way of looking at and managing the MySQL stuff that's on the server. So I need to create a MySQL user. Again, this is something that like your web host will probably do for you, or your IT guy will probably do for you. Nonetheless, I think it's useful to demonstrate this stuff, especially while we have some time. I need a user for my MySQL database. I could use the root user, but it's most common not to use the root user. It's a security consideration. So I want to just create a user called Sean for MySQL. Actually, I'm going to do something more unique because I'm not really sure if I already have a user called Sean. So I want Sean to have access, or I want this new user to have access to localhost, and I need a password. You can tell by the number of characters that this is not a secure password, but it's useful for demonstration. Oh no, I don't want to do that. The join me admin panel is constantly getting in the way of my demos, but you guys probably don't even see that, so I don't think it's getting in the way of what you're seeing. So I want this user Sean to have a database with the same name, Sean Fall Drupal. Fall is in autumn, because this is the autumn edition of this course. So now I have a username and a database for Drupal to talk to MySQL. The one thing I forgot to do is give the web server user needs to have permission to edit files in the Drupal installation. So basically, like, Drupal needs to have access to write to files inside the Drupal directory. So again, I can do this on the command line. I could also do it in a limited way via the FTP editor, but it's quicker just to show you how to do it on the command line. So, so what have we done so far? We've installed Drupal onto the server. We told Apache how to find the installation and put it on the internet. And then we created a MySQL database that Drupal will populate, and the database will store all of our content and configuration and stuff like that. And then the last thing I did was I tweaked the file permissions, the Linux file permissions, so that Drupal can have access to write to some of these directories. Now I'm ready to run the Drupal install script. So I want to use the standard installation profile. I want to install Drupal in English. I created that database called Sean Fall Drupal. And the username is also Sean Fall Drupal. And I had a password. And I want to hit save. And now Drupal's installing. And then we have like one more step to get us to the point in the experience that Aegir got us to automatically. So I'm doing all the manual stuff that Aegir did on the background when we filled out that form at the beginning of the demo. So the site email address should be whatever you want it to be. And then the admin account, I usually use admin. You can use whatever you want. You need to give the maintenance account an email address and a password as well as a username, and then hit save. And now there's going to be a new website. So this gets us to the same starting point that that initial script did at the beginning of the demo. I just did it in a much more manual way. So I hope that was useful to you. Any questions? We have like a few minutes left in the hour. Yeah, Bill says, I think I like the other way more. Yeah, I mean, the truth is, you know, that platform Aegir is like pretty complex, and I've spent a ton of hours getting familiar with it. And I don't really like it. I don't use it on any like production environments that I manage. It's just, you know, it's just a little too complex, I think, and it's too like monolithic. So when something goes wrong, things really get bad. But anyway, for our purposes, yeah, it makes the site management a lot easier. Any other questions or anything? WordPress, you know, we'll spend some time maybe throughout this course comparing Drupal to WordPress. WordPress has its famous 5-minute install. Like if you go to the WordPress site and you read about installing WordPress, they'll talk about their famous 5-minute install. The truth is the installation process for WordPress is like nearly identical to the installation process for Drupal. And I can install Drupal in under 5 minutes, like in my sleep, you know, with 110-degree fever, you know, whatever. It's something that I've done like dozens and dozens of times, and it's not, it's a very basic process. Talking through it takes a little longer than 5 minutes, but it's pretty simple once you understand what's going on. Yeah, if you make a backup, can you restore it on another computer? This is a really good question. The backups that you guys are creating with your backup and migrate module are backups of the Drupal database, not the entire Drupal package. So you're backing up just the MySQL database, which is like the content and configuration of your site. It's all the stuff that makes your site unique from your classmates' sites. So if you needed to restore to another computer, you would need the backup database, and you would need the Drupal core and the modules, all the stuff that you can get from Drupal.org. So in other words, the backup and migrate module doesn't create like a complete snapshot of your site that you could just plug into another server. If you wanted to do something like that, which I definitely recommend, like every production environment has a couple different methods for backing up. If you wanted to have a backup that will create a more complete snapshot of your Drupal database and code base, you would have to do something through like a shell script on the server, and those are pretty common. Or just ask your host if your host has backups, or ask your IT guy to write a shell script. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense? Okay, sorry. Email me or post a message to the forum. Post a message to the forum, and I'll give a more complete answer. Kevin asks, can you describe the shell script? Yeah, I mean, the shell script, I'll just describe the basic process of what the script would do. It just varies based on your environment, but the shell script would create a tarball, like an archive of the Drupal code base, and then the script would create it would export the MySQL database and probably compress it, and then compress the code base and the. I'm probably describing not the most efficient way to do it, but you would basically copy the code base, export the database, compress it, and then like use rsync or SCP to send the files to a remote location. Does that basically make sense? And then the shell script would be executed on whatever schedule you want. The shell script would be executed on a certain schedule during the server's cron tasks. And if you Google a little bit, you can find some examples of shell scripts for backing up Drupal. So we have like 3 minutes left in the hour. Any other questions or anything? Yeah, okay, thank you guys. Yeah, looking forward to talking more on the forums. Thanks, Christine. Yeah, I think it's helpful to do these demos too. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm signing off.